Hello, welcome to our latest installment of our SQF 365 program. So thank you for joining myself and Eurofins today for our digital seminar entitled Food Safety Culture. For those that don't know me, I'm Tammy Van Buren. I'm the compliance manager here at SQFI, and I'm going to start out by introducing our speaker today, Mr. Brian Neal. Brian is with Eurofins, one of the SQF registered licensed certification bodies. He is the technical manager. He's been in the food industry about 20 years. The last 10 of those, he's either been an auditor or a technical manager. You can see there, Oklahoma State University. So I don't know if we have any fans out there of Oklahoma State, but Brian currently lives in Texas, and I'm going to let Brian take it away and tell you all about food safety culture. If you have questions, please be chatting those in. We are going to have a time at the end for Q&A, and we'll be keeping up with your questions. So Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you, SQF, for hosting the call. Just first, of course, a couple of introductory slides of Eurofins, because a lot of people don't know that we're something other than labs. Of course, we're labs, but we're also do everything else that the other certification bodies do, as you can see there. So just look us up if you need anything. All right, so I'll get into what you came for, not the sales pitch. So food safety culture, just a few topics here we're going to talk about. And of course, it's only 3 things showing on the screen, but there's a lot of information for food safety culture. So first, the definition, and I just put it all on the screen here, and I'll read it. You can read it. Defined by GFSI and SQF. So shared values, beliefs, and norms that affect mindset and behavior towards food safety in, across, and throughout an organization. So, I mean, there's a lot of information there. So we won't end it there. We'll get into a little bit more. So what does all that mean? So food safety culture is more than a policy. It's not just you document a policy. Here's our policy. We're good for food safety culture. We've got to go a little bit further than that, of course. Your emphasis on the awareness and behavior among employees of a company. So, and that means everybody must be aware of food safety culture, what it is, and it is a behavior company-wide. It's not just one person. It's not just 2 persons. It's company-wide. Everyone must be aware of the food safety culture, what it is, what it means, and the behavior must be adopted by everyone. And to tie into that is management commitment. Management commitment is key to the success of a food safety culture, not just the policy as we talked about, but the implementation, the communication. If those top management, senior management they don't have the food safety culture in mind and they don't practice what they preach, then it's not going to be successful in the business. So it starts at the top and works its way down from there. And then, of course, what you do when no one is looking. And that means, yes, we can train, we can talk, we can communicate, we can practice what we preach as managers. But if people on the floor or you as a manager, you do something different than what you preach when no one is looking, then that food safety culture system is broken and is not working properly. All right, so how can you address food safety culture in your process, in your building? So communication. Set clear expectations of what food safety culture is and how you expect it to be followed, your expectations of your employees, and not only expectations, but help setting their mind at ease. If they do see a food safety issue, they can report it without consequence of something happening to them, depending on what that issue is, shutting down the line, for example. Number 3, communication. The next one's proper training of all employees. So, and what that means, yes, we can have a policy in place, but we need to make sure people understand what food safety culture is, and also, food safety in general. So we have, of course, your HACCP, you have your GMPs, you have all these things that tie into the food safety umbrella. But do your employees, are they properly trained on those processes? Do they know how to practice them, how to implement them? And of course, that culture. Again, or not again, we'll just say it new. Next is communication. Next is management review. So during this management review, you want to look at your food safety culture policy Look at any incidents that have happened throughout the year or last month, last week, whenever you have your review meetings, and look at those trends and talk about them as managers to see, here's what's happening, what do we need to do, and how can we address this, and figure out how to make things better if there are issues. I mean, there's always room for improvement somewhere. It's all about continuous improvement. Next, communication, and then set clear goals. So setting clear goals is just like you currently do in your facility with setting goals and KPIs throughout your facility, but tied directly to, of course, food safety. To meet those goals, make sure the employees, everyone in the facility, from again top down, are aware of what those goals are, how you meet them, how you achieve them, and set a value to them. So you'll notice communication is on there a lot, and that's because I think communication, in my opinion, is the most important part of not just food safety culture, but any system you put in place. Because without it, it's just a piece of paper you have in your office sitting in a binder that's getting dusty to your next SQF audit. So communication, you need to keep communication open, and that's again open office. If somebody has an issue, they feel comfortable coming to the senior management. They feel comfortable going to the president of the company, whoever it may be, to communicate those issues that are or are not getting addressed, on the level right above them. So expectation to communicate. Reference establishing a food safety culture and policy. So we all have our food safety policy, quality policy, if we're, have the quality as well, but you need to reference that food safety culture in your quality policy itself. And then your process, how do you define food safety culture? What does it mean to you as a company? I mean, it could mean something different to you, it could mean something different to me. So how do you define it? And then again, make sure it meets the intent of what SQF is saying it needs to meet. That definition we go back to. So, include food safety culture in your policy statement. And that is something we will look for as auditors. And I like this one. Develop a catchy slogan. So you can put it, on a banner when employees walk into the office or into the, walk into the building for the first time of the day, put it by the time clock, put it, in the production area, put it wherever you want. So they see this and it reminds them of that culture. It's always in their face. Food safety starts here. It helps them think that, oh, I am part of a bigger thing here, and I can make a difference. So, again, you don't have to do this, but it's a good thing to help, get the message across that you do care. You are committed to food safety. You are committed to food safety culture, and it helps the buy-in because they see this every day, and it helps remind them of the importance of food safety. Because it's so easy for all of us to just get busy through our normal day and just do our job. My job is to, check temperatures of hamburger patties. My job is to do this, whatever it may be. So we need to help remind them of food safe culture as a whole. Food safety isn't just my little area, my little bubble. It's everywhere from start to finish, and everywhere in between. So how do you communicate? Going back to management. So do as I do. It's not that, do as I say kind of thing. It's do as I do. So management, they need to lead by example. So a good example of this is, we train our employees, hand washing is key before they go to work. They come into the production area, they wash their hands, and they go to work. And, if you put gloves on and do all that stuff afterwards, but, hand washing is the first step to this process. So we expect our employees to do that, but do managers do that when they walk into the production floor? Do they just walk by the hand wash sink and go on their way because they don't think they have to? And I'll say that it does happen where managers just walk in. I've been on audits. I've been to facilities before. I've worked in facilities before where this happens. The top management just walk in those doors and on they go. They don't even look at the hand wash sink. So that's the first step to, do as I do kind of actions where employees seeing you do one way or the other. And if you're not stopping, then why should they stop? So make sure you practice by example, lead by example. Expectations include all of the team members. And again, I know we keep saying top management down, but that's definitely where this food safety culture needs to start. It can't start, at wherever the lower levels are. it has to start at the top and work its way down, because if it's not at the top, it's never going to work anywhere beneath that. Reporting food safety incidents. So that, and what that means, if when employees are on the floor and they're doing their normal day to day and they see a food safety incident, if they see a drop of water dripping from the ceiling onto the conveyor belt or whatever it may be, teach them what they need to do. If that's stopping the line, if that's, getting their direct supervisor involved, whatever that may be, make sure everyone understands the reporting structure and what they need to do when they see a food safety incident. Of course, good behavior and brand reputation. And all that means is if there is a bad behavior of food safety culture and people aren't out there reporting these incidents, then we all know what would happen. So we had water dripping from the ceiling. Let's say there's listeria in it. It goes on to your cooked whatever it may be. Now we got listeria on all this product just going down the floor, going to the packages, going to consumers, and then it really hurts your brand. It could shut your brand down. I mean, it's put a lot of companies out of business with recalls. So, and that's why we don't do, have good food safety culture, good food safety practices for brand reputation. It's of course for the consumer safety, but if you do not have it, that brand reputation will fail, and ultimately the company will fail. Okay, some more of how you communicate. Frequent meetings with employees. I know some facilities have daily meetings with their employees, so the shifts will come in. The shift supervisor, shift manager will have a daily meeting with the employees. If that's on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, however you define that. But have some sort of a frequent meeting with employees to talk about food safety, and not just keep repeating the same thing over. Maybe let them, come up with things like, well, what have you seen lately? Is there anything else you see that we could be doing better, or the company could be doing better, could make improvements on? So allow them to ask questions, allow them to speak, because maybe if one person says something, it'll trigger something in someone else's mind to, ask a question or bring up something they've seen or something someone is doing. And to that point, you don't have to, but use an anonymous means of reporting. And this is because it may be they don't feel comfortable reporting their manager, or they don't feel comfortable reporting the president of the company for something they have done that is not food safe. It falls outside of what we believe in, what our practices are as a company. So if that's anonymous emails, anonymous Dropbox where they can write it down and stick into this box and it's addressed by the management team. But with that, if you do have some sort of anonymous system in place, you'll want to come up with another method to make sure people know that you're addressing those issues. So if that's a message board, we put this anonymous tip up. If you discuss it with these meetings with your employees, say here's something we received in the anonymous box, so everybody is aware of it. You're the person who put the report in knows that you're taking action on it. You're not just sitting on it and not doing anything because they keep seeing the same thing happen over and over and over. So, come up with a system where employees feel comfortable reporting these issues, but also come up with a way that they know you're addressing these issues. At the same time, discuss events that are happening not just in your company, but industry-wide. If you hear something in the news, if you hear a recall that could have been prevented, discuss that in these meetings with employees so they're aware of some examples, some real-world examples of what's happening outside of your four walls, for example. So it helps them broaden their spectrum, open their blinders a bit, I guess, if you will, on things to look at. Update postings frequently. This goes back to a little bit on the top one, make sure people, when they report things, they know you're addressing them. If you have postings around food safety incidents, food safety topics, don't leave the same posting up for 6 months. You want to change those out so people they just see it and say, oh, it's the same thing, and move on. And eventually they stop looking at it. So you want to make sure that you have something there. If it's a news bulletin or a letter you guys put together, change those postings. A lot of places have a place by the time clock that has, regulatory stuff posted and things like that. But put something up there for these folks to read as well, to keep food safety fresh in their minds. And of course, these management meetings, you have those at least monthly. You can have daily, you can have weekly, but at least monthly. Discuss everything we've talked about so far. If there have been any incidents reported, either anonymously or not, or other, talk about them as management team. Make sure you put those in your minutes that you're talking about food safety culture and food safety incidents, and what action you're taking on those, if any are needed after your investigation. All right, so training. This is a lot here, but again, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, as we go through this, you'll see food safety culture has always been in SQF. It's always been in GFSI, but they specifically called it out in the code now to make sure people are aware of what it is and what they need to do to address it. So training for food safety culture, it goes beyond basic GMPs and other normal topics like HACCP, because that's stuff that's always been covered. We've always talked about training in GMPs. We've always had training in HACCP and sanitation, things like that. But go beyond that. Go outside the box and come up with topics for food safety culture on stuff you could train about. And it could be things like, here's examples of incidents you may see out there. Here's how to report it. Here's how you're protected as an employee if you report something, things like that. So think outside of these normal training programs you have in place. And just like with any other training program, every employee needs to have this topic covered. If you bring in somebody new during their new hire orientation, make sure you discuss this with them. At that point, you talk about your GMP, you talk about HACCP, you talk about allergens, whatever it may be, but make sure you also include food safety culture in that topic, or in that training session. And then again, at least annually. And at least annually means if there's something that has changed in the process, if you've had a number of occurrences that had to be fixed, had to be corrected, that maybe you did not consider initially, you'll want to maybe have a refresher training with people to ensure that everybody is aware of this, everyone is aware how to prevent it, and kind of keep an eye out for it. So yeah, at least annually or if needed. And again, everyone's responsibility. So food safety is everyone's responsibility, not just the people out there taking the temperatures for HACCP, taking your CCP temperatures, your CCP steps. Everyone from the top all the way down, you need to be trained on food safety culture and food safety in general. So make sure everybody is aware of it. And again, as I said, include reporting those incidents into your training. How they do it, follow-up actions and things like that. Requirement for reporting for food safety. Who do you report it to? If that's to your direct manager, if that's to HR, if that's to the president of the company, if that's to outside consultant, whoever that is, make sure people are aware how to report those incidents, so they do get properly addressed. And then go deep enough to convince them of the importance of food safety. And I've used this before in the past with, I've done food safety trainings when I worked in facilities. I mean, like I said, we're all there doing our job. We get busy in our day-to-day activities, and we may not consider how it affects the next person, because we may, wipe our nose that's running on our glove. Then we start packing, pieces into a box, and it just kind of keeps going and going and going. And next thing we know, it's in the consumer's mouth, and their kids are eating it, and your family's eating it. So be aware and help them understand how what they do in their little stations inside your building affects not only their families, but other people's families and friends and children. So that's really important to help them understand the importance of food safety. And then, of course, during this training, include corrective action. So what'll happen if something is reported? So it goes back to, if you report something, making sure everyone is aware of what that incident was, so everybody knows to look out for that. What we're doing to correct the issue, or you did to correct the issue, and think of your proper corrective action steps. So here's what we did to fix it, because we did our root cause. Here's what we did to fix it, and here's what we're going to do to prevent it from happening again. So make sure in this training, explain to them what will happen if there is an incident, if it is reported. So to make sure you include that as well, that actions will be taken. And I would also recommend you put those on a log somewhere. So you have your customer complaint log, for example. Put those on a log so you can track those and trend those, and and go over those with your employees. Go over those during your management meetings and your management review to make sure that you're not seeing the same thing over and over, to make sure your corrective action is actually working. And how do you measure it? So following your training, it's always a good idea to give an exam. You know, it could be 5 questions, could be 10 questions, could be however many questions you want to put in there. But to test the, I guess, the retention of those employees of what you've just taught them. And I know that there's a lot of trainings on the computer, for example. So, I mean, that's easy enough. They do the training module, it goes into the exam. And if they get a below a certain score, they have to go through the training again. Or maybe it's a one-on-one training at that point with a person. Whatever that may be, have some way to test their knowledge of food safety and food safety culture following these trainings, to ensure that they understand what it is and how to practice it, how to report it, you know, things like that. And again, going back to the anonymous thing, so comfort of reporting, manager approachable, and company values. And what this is you could put out a survey to your employees following the training, or really any time, to your employees, saying, here's 5 questions, you know, how comfortable do you feel reporting incidents to your manager, kind of thing. Are your managers approachable? Are they easy to talk to, or do they blow you off, or whatever it may be? And make sure they understand those company values. And if the results from these surveys are not favorable, then you want to reconsider your food safety culture procedure, process, its training, everything that goes along with it, because obviously there's an issue if the results of that survey are not favorable within your company. So think about doing something like that. And it doesn't have to be an all the time survey. It could be one time. You could do it once. Let's say tomorrow, do it and get the results of those surveys and be done with it. Or you could do every 1 year, every 2 years, every 3 years. But it wouldn't be a bad practice to have something in place like that, so you know what's really going on in your facility, because they may be afraid to come to the president of the company and tell them these issues. But if it's an anonymous survey where they take it, they drop it into a box when they feel comfortable dropping it into a box, or you have an employee advocate, something like that, they can hand it to, and then these results are then looked at by the management team. Employee observations. So this is a good one. So going back to what I said, is doing the right thing when no one is looking. And this is a good way to do it. You have, and I used to do this too, and I still do an audit sometimes, sit on catwalks or stand back behind machines and just watch employees work. Because when they don't know you're there watching them, they may or may not do things differently. And it's not like you're trying to get them and say, oh, I got you. You're not trying to catch them doing something wrong. You just want to make sure they're doing what's right. And if they're not, coach them to the right thing and make sure they do those right things. And also what you could do is some sort of a recognition program for employees. If you catch them doing something good, you know, for example, if a box of chicken nuggets falls on the floor, do they put them back in the box and put them on the conveyor belt? Or do they put those things in the edible or the trash? So if you catch employees doing something good, you know, reward them with something, you know, some sort of program like that. So, and that will help build confidence in your system to all of the employees that you believe in food safety culture, you believe in you know, sending a safe product out the door, and you as management stand with them and support them. And again, number of incidents reported. So make sure all of I know it sounds like a broken record, a lot of this, but it's just how important some of these things are, is tracking these incidents and reporting them so people are aware of them. And also you can do your trend analysis, you know, like customer complaints, for example. You do the same thing for complaints. You see what's going on and see if there's any common issues happening in different areas of the facility, or the same issue keeps happening over and over again. So that was just a little bit of introductory with food safety culture, some little how-tos and whatnot. So now we're going to dig into SQF, how they look at food safety culture. Okay, so this is the code requirement. We're not going to read it all. It's a lot, but and you do see, though, it is in the senior management section of the code. And this goes back to what we've talked about just a few minutes ago, is it starts with senior management. So make sure you read this section of the code. It's in every code, regardless of what food sector category you are. this section of the code is in there. So please be aware of this. And again, yes, you do have to have your policy and your performances, all that stuff documented, but it's not just that. It's all these other things we've already talked about, and lots more. I mean, you guys have more ideas than I do. So if there's something else that we didn't talk about and you have other ideas that you've been using, please keep going with that. Again, continuous improvement. It's always about improvement because we can always do something better. Okay, so, and as you may or may not know, on the SKF website, you can download the codes, of course, but they also have these guidance section where you can look at guidance on different topics, food defense on there, food fraud. And then there's one on there for food safety cultures. So the guidance document within SQF talks about our team members doing the right thing when no one is watching. So this is what we talked about it already. Are they, and not just team members working on the production floor, but management members as well. So making sure everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing while no one is watching. And again, this goes back to watching those employees work when they don't know you're watching them, to make sure they're doing the right thing. And same for management and calling them out if they're not. Employees are empowered and encouraged to do the right thing and report events that could impact food safety. So you give them the power to stop the production line if they see an issue that's going to make somebody sick. That critical nonconformance, if you will, in your SQF audit. If you see water dripping directly on a conveyor belt, give them the power to hit that e-stop, stop the production line completely without getting in trouble, if you will. And then hit that e-stop, find their direct supervisor, say, hey, here's what's going on. We need to take care of this, and hope the proper action gets taken care of. And if it doesn't, they need to feel comfortable that they can go to whoever their manager, their supervisor is, and report that. If their direct supervisor decides that, we're starting to line back up and getting going. So empower and encourage them to do the right thing. Training and employee surveys are starting point, but not end point. So, we've talked about training to food safety culture, food safety in general, and in the surveys we talked about. But you need to do more than just teach your employees, here's what the policy says, and here's what we would like you to do. And yeah, we care, so we're doing a survey, but we still have to make sure those things are implemented, and we're following them on a daily basis. So it's easy to just have a policy in our book, as I talked about. It's easy to tell employees, to train employees on that policy, but are we implementing that policy? Are employees practicing that policy and good practices in general? So make sure you go beyond just having the policy in place and saying we meet the requirements of SQF, because if that's all you're doing, you're not meeting the requirements of SQF, but you're not doing yourself any favors either as a company. So auditors will assess food safety culture, and they do that through, of course, records review to make sure records are accurate and complete to the your policy. So your HACCP plan, we look at, of course, HACCP records to make sure that they're complete, they're accurate. We don't see falsification kind of thing. Everything is real-time data. It's not pre-filled out before the production day even starts. And it's some of those things you may not think are easy to spot, but auditors can spot things like that fairly easy. So make sure that food safety culture everywhere. Interviews with employees at all levels. So as you know, auditors will go out there and interview machine operators, they'll interview line workers, they'll interview your sanitation people, they'll interview management. So they can interview anybody out there, of course, as long as it doesn't disrupt and make things unsafe. So we will interview those employees to make sure that they're aware of, and we won't say food safety culture. We may ask them, do you know what food safety culture is? But ask them seed questions to see what they know about food safety culture. If you see this happening, if the metal detector isn't working, what will you do? Will you report it to? Things like that. So we will ask questions around that to make sure that they know if this happens, what do we do, kind of thing. And auditors, of course, will observe employee behavior. As I said, I, as an auditor, just like standing back and just watching, just to see how things are going, what people are doing. It's really easy to, we go back to GMP, so just to stand back and watch. And if people don't know you're watching them, they'll be chewing some gum. They'll be, doing things they shouldn't be doing. So just at you as, management, you as your employees, just stand back and watch people, see how they're working. And auditors will do that as well. We don't just walk through with blinders on, or we shouldn't walk through with blinders on and just look at one thing and not look at everything else. We should have our eyes wide open kind of thing and look at everything and observe the employees, observe the equipment, observe the surroundings. We should be looking at all of these things while we're out there doing this audit. So why is it important? And again, this is in the SQF guidance document. So collectively, those activities that create a favorable mindset that drives the behavior of everyone in the organization. So food safety culture, again, it's a mindset that we have to ensure people understand. It's not just telling them, it's them living it every day. It's them practicing it every day. And this goes back to what helps is, have that slogan on a banner printed up somewhere, have it on their message board, or have it on TV in the break room, whatever it may be, where it keeps it on the front of their mind every day while they're out there working. Again, starting at the top and extending to all employees, because if the top management does not practice food safety culture, does not practice good food safety practices, I said practice a couple times there, but then it's not going to work downstream either. So they need to practice what they preach, that it starts at the top, works its way down. If you have a senior manager that tells their employees what to do and then go locks himself in the office all day and never comes out, then why should they follow what he tells them to do if he's never out there? He's never kind of amongst them, hanging out with them, if you will. So these managers need to do as I do kind of mindset. And again, needs to be part of the food safety policy. So we have that food safety policy. We have posted by the time clock. We have posted in the break room, wherever we have that posted at, in English, in Spanish, in Chinese, and whatever language your employees speak. Include food safety culture in your policy, along with how you feel, how you define food safety culture, and maybe put some of your goals in there. Okay. All right, so road to audit. So this is something else in the SQF guidance document to kind of help guide you, as you will, on what we can do, how we can do it, and what the auditor will do when they're on site. So this is examples of what auditors will look at, or you, for example, how you can ensure food safety culture is implemented in your facility. These different records, of course, training records. We've talked about training multiple times today. The disciplinary process, if someone is reported for not following a good food safety practice, and the investigation determines that, is there a process in place to discipline those employees not following practices? Or as managers or supervisors or whoever, could be anybody, observes a poor practice, what happens to that employee not following the practice? I mean, that could even be the president of the company. Is there something in place to correct that issue and make sure there's a record of that correction? Make sure employees are aware of the organizational chart, and auditors will look at the org chart as well to make sure who's in charge, who reports to who, things like that. But as a company, it's a good idea to post this organizational chart for your employees, because, for example, they may be down at the bottom and they know their direct supervisor, but who's above their direct supervisor? So if their direct supervisor doesn't, address these food safety concerns, who would they go to next? And again, that open door policy, or some way of communicating to that upper management if they need to. If that's through, anonymous email, if that's through a phone call, whatever that is, some sort of method to communicate to those folks above. We'll also look at your food safety incidents and look to see if you've your corrective actions. If it was a capital project you had to put in place, look at any work orders that are associated with that incident report, things like that. So here's just some examples of what auditors, record-wise, auditors may look at to assess food safety culture in your facility and ensure implementation. All right, so some questions that we may ask as auditors, you can ask during your internal audit. If you have an internal auditor, they may ask, employees can ask. So how is the site meeting your food safety objectives? How are they measured? Provide examples of when additional resources were needed. So for example, if there was some an incident that happened and because I report an incident, like I'm the only person here and there's no way I can keep up and product keeps falling on the floor kind of thing, were additional resources needed for that? Yeah, definitely, because I can't keep up, the belt's going too fast, and we need somebody else here, or slow the belt down, something. So were additional resources needed? If yes, then were those supplied, or what else happened kind of after that? What happens if someone violates the food safety policy or procedures, food safety culture plan, procedures? It goes back to if you have a disciplinary action program in place, whatever that is, what happens? It's not just we go on with our life, we throw that incident, we throw that complaint in the trash and move on with our day because that employee's, he's our favorite employee and he does a lot of work for us, and we don't want to make him upset for him to leave. We need to make sure everyone is comfortable with our system and what the program we have in place, where if they report something, action is going to happen. Or it goes back to management not doing what they say they're going to do, and people are just not going to do what they need to do to make sure the product is safe at the end of the day. And another question: explain a time when management was made aware of a food safety issue, and then what was that response? So if someone reports to their direct supervisor an issue, and maybe they won't have an example, maybe they will, maybe they won't, and maybe their direct supervisor or the management team needs to kind of walk away for these questions to make sure it's a fair and they feel safe answering them. What was the response to that incident that was brought up to the management team? And this goes back to what I said earlier. What would you do if you observed this food safety violation? So metal detection failure, CCP, rodent sightings, all these things. What would you do as an employee if you looked at a label at the end of the boxing line? Oh, this is the wrong label. We've packed 10 boxes of this in the wrong product or in the wrong label. What would you do as an employee if something like that happened? Or if you're going through your day, you're doing your hourly metal detector checks, and the box with the wand goes straight on through like nothing ever happened. What would you do at that point? So ask these questions, and we do as auditors. What would you do if this happens, to ensure people know what to do instead of, well, I don't know, I just let it go. So we want to ensure people know, what the issue is, because if they're not aware of, what they do when they see these things, then it's a training issue. It could be a management commitment issue. So we want to ensure that, implementation, this proves directly, the implementation has been done and people are following it and they know the practices and the, the policies and what needs to happen. So in summary, as I've said a couple times at least, the food safety culture starts at senior management and works its way down. It cannot start at the bottom, and people on a production floor packing a box can't come up with food safety culture and try to enforce it and try to help people understand what it is. It needs to start at the top and practice from the top, not just start at the top, but practice at the top and ensure practice throughout the facility. Because if it starts at the top, it doesn't practice at the top, as we said, it's going to fail everywhere in between. What you do when no one is looking. So if the person has the good integrity, they have that food safety culture ingrained in their mind, they have that mindset that it's on the forefront of their mind, they're going to do what's right when no one is looking. But if they don't, or maybe they have it there, they just they've been told they have to get the numbers out, make sure that's the whole observation of the employees. What you do of your employees, what they do, what you do as management, what anybody does. Food safety auditors, for example, what they do. And if a food safety auditor comes in, a USDA inspector comes in, FDA inspector comes in, they need to follow this as well. So I should have mentioned that earlier, but just be aware of that. There are plenty of times where regulatory bodies come in and they don't follow your food safety practices. They also have to follow them if they're inside your facility. Okay, got a little bit there. As we mentioned a couple times also on the slide up there, communication, and we talked about it 4 or 5 times, is key in the success of this program. So communication with all of the employees. Have regular meetings with your employees, if that's daily, if that's weekly, if that's monthly, to talk about food safety culture, food safety incidents, food safety topics. Communicate this down so they're aware of what it is, what their part is in the scheme of things. So everybody is aware of what they need to do, what they need to look out for, and how they play a part in it. And if you give them some ownership into the program, they're going to buy into it more, and they're really going to, follow it and make sure everybody else kind of follows it. As we talked about, come up with a catchy slogan to help it keep that on people's minds. If you have that slogan on a banner that walk in and there it is, or put it outside so everybody sees it, driving by, walking by, something, food safety starts with me kind of thing. So that person's like, oh yeah, I am food safety. So they go to work every day. They ensure food safety practices are being followed. They ensure people are aware of food safety practices, and they kind of keep things going. So they see that slogan, they see that banner, they see that on the TV, whatever it may be, every day, multiple times a day. It helps keep that on their mind, as we saw in the SQF guidance. Mindset. It's all about the mindset. Reassure employees of the importance of food safety. It goes back to communication. Make sure that they are aware. We talked about putting a posting up, every month, every week, come up with a new posting of a different food safety topic. And those, of course, can recirculate because you can only come up with so many. So if you put one up this month, put a different up next month, and try to keep fresh things out there, not the same thing posted every day for employees to look at, because they may see it, and like I said, oh, it's the same thing, and walk by, and they eventually don't look at that thing to see what's going on. So keep that out there. Also, help communicate, or not help communicate, but communicate what these issues are that people are seeing. If someone comes to the manager, reports an issue, come up with a way of tracking, trending, documenting those things so you can communicate back to the employees so they're aware. And all employees can make a difference. I mean, we've talked about that this entire time, is of course the management makes a difference, but every employee on the floor, you may have 1,000 people working in your facility, and it just takes one person to make a difference. And it could be good or bad. I mean, it could be a bad difference. You may have somebody out there that doesn't follow, and a lot of people look up to that person, and it spreads like wildfire. But at the same time, if you have people out there doing the right thing and doing what's right and practicing those food safety, good food safety practices, and following good food safety culture, that also spreads, and people see it, and they will start practicing it. So again, just, top down communication, and just help everyone understand what food safety culture is, what's important to you for food safety, and just keep that going every day. And with that, I am finished up for what I have, and I will pass it back over to Tammy.
Hello again, everyone. So great job, Ryan. Lots of great information. Thank you for being here today and participating. We've got lots of great questions. So I'm going to jump into the questions before I finish up with the last slide. So there were a lot of questions around food safety culture checklist or questionnaires or surveys. And so people were really looking for some best practices to share with regards to that. So do you have anything? Have you seen some best practices when you've been out auditing sites?
Yeah, I think that something that I've seen that works is the surveys. You could have employees put their names on it or not, and that just helps you as a company. Once you introduce the food safety culture and these food safety best practices out there, it helps reassure to you that the message got across, that people understand it, that they feel comfortable with the culture in your facility. So I feel that the survey is a good way to go about that. and then kind of build off of that. If you feel that, one survey isn't enough, you didn't get maybe the results weren't favorable, like I said, you do some retraining, you do some refreshing, you change things up a bit, and then do another survey, and just until, people feel comfortable practicing and putting those things in place.
Yeah. I will admit I'm not a huge fan of surveys. Just because a wise person once told me, if you're going to do a survey, you have to be prepared to respond to all the information you received, good or bad. And a lot of companies that I see that have done surveys, they're just so overwhelmed by the responses that they don't they aren't prepared to respond to the results. So I would just caution, if you are going to use a questionnaire or survey, just make sure you're prepared for the results. But no, great response there. Now, we did have a question about how do we get people to participate in surveys if we want to do it anonymously. How do we get high participation? We had one person that said, they just couldn't get the numbers they were seeing. So do you have any thoughts on that, Brian?
It is difficult because it is anonymous, and to get a good turnout, because you say, this is voluntary, you don't have to, but if you want to, you can. And at that point, it's probably, like you said, Tammy, going to be the people that have negative things to say, or, it's those negative things some managers don't want to see or don't have time for. So the only other way you could really do this is maybe place some sort of reward system where if they do it, they get something. But then again, if it's anonymous, which a lot of employees would rather it be anonymous, it is difficult. I understand the challenges on getting responses from these employees. I do. It's a difficult
I have an
thing.
example. Yeah, you mentioned reward. So I was doing a survey one time and I wanted 100% participation. And so I actually sat in the break room with ice cream and chocolate syrup sprinkles. And I said, if you'll sit down here at the end of your break, I'll give you 5 extra minutes on break, fill out my survey, stick it in the envelope anonymously, and you can have an ice cream sundae. So I like the reward part of it, trying to get people to participate and do something fun. So somebody mentioned that. What are some fun
That's a good
things?
point. Yeah. I mean, it is anonymous, but they can sit in the break room and they can do it in front of you, or, across the room from you. You don't have to know who they are. And that way they still get their treat at the end of the day. Yeah. Good idea.
Exactly. So somebody had asked about, some fun things that we can do to get people engaged. And for me, it was always about, people having fun and enjoying what they were doing, that to get them involved. So let's see. There were so many questions. Great. So I looked at the data before I got on here, Brian. Probably the biggest non-conformance for food safety culture was the absence of those food safety objectives and performance measures. They either weren't established, or they weren't documented, or they weren't communicated. So what are your thoughts on getting those food safety objectives? You talked a lot about communication. So how can we make sure that we're getting that piece of it in there? How can we measure that?
Yeah. So when you develop these KPIs, these objectives, these goals, you want to, of course, put those out there. And if that's putting on your posting board, or, addressing this with your employees in these weekly meetings, here's our goals and here's our objectives, and what those performance objectives are, you put that out there. Here's how here's when we consider it success. Here's when we consider it a failure. Instead of, again, just putting them in your policy or putting them somewhere and leaving them until your annual management review, you want to put those out there. But I mean, it's really, it varies from site to site to, as far as what your objectives and your goals could be. I mean, it could be, customer complaints. It could be a lot of things. It could be involved in these objectives, because food safety culture, it includes everything. It's not just your employees, but what your employees do could could cause a complaint. It could do some things. So how do you judge success in food safety culture? And I apologize, I don't have better examples for that, but it's definitely, it varies from site to site. And it goes back to the beginning, is define what food safety culture is for you and what it means to you and your employees, and kind of base it, go down from there off your definition.
Yeah, no, great point. And talking about measuring that performance, some of the next largest groups of nonconformances come from the management review, where you're supposed to be reviewing your food safety culture performance, and people are forgetting that piece of it. So finding that way to measure it. One way that I measured it, we had cameras at our hand wash station when I was a practitioner, and I would sit and just watch video, and I would keep up with how many people properly wash their hands, because they didn't know I was watching. And then it was a competition. I would say, first shift, 98% of you washed your hands properly, but second shift, you were at 85%. Third shift, you were at 87. So it became a little bit of a competition. Again, another little bit of fun, but it was a measure of how we were doing. So thinking outside the box. I don't think we do that enough. I don't think we're thinking outside the box enough for performance. So communication, you talked about it a lot. You talked about meetings. Who should be leading those meetings?
I would say, because you want your food safety culture to start at the top, you would want that senior manager out there leading these meetings. Of course, you have your senior managers, you have your direct supervisor, you have everybody out there in front of everybody, but you would want that senior management out there communicating these things to employees, so they understand that you value food safety culture, you value what they have to say, good or bad, you value that thing. So I would want that senior manager, if it's your plant manager, operations manager, whoever that is, interacting, be the face of food safety culture in front of these employees, so they know you're serious about it and you support them in their practice of that food safety culture.
Absolutely. No. Yeah. That leads me to probably the next most requested question is, how do you get that senior site leadership involved? How do you get them to support that good food safety culture?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because at the end of the day, you have the CEO, the president of the company, who says, I own this, I can do whatever I want. And it takes more to get them to practice what they preach. But it's all about those, and maybe it's the anonymous reporting, where if someone's reported, like the president came out and didn't wash his hands, he walked right by. You've got to have somebody that understands the risk of that, and they say, I'm going to call that president out, or if that's the HR, if that's whatever it is, to get the buy-in. But to get the buy-in from the senior management, it is difficult, because who's going to tell them they have to do it? If they're on top of the company, if they own the company, for example, and they want to bring 50 of their most famous of their closest friends out there wearing their high heels and wearing their diamond bracelets, it's difficult to get that across. It's all about the employees beneath them, holding them accountable as well, because they hold us accountable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes I know, as a practitioner myself in a previous life, I always wanted to do, the best on our SQF audit to get the highest score I could. But, those are the types of things that should kind of rise to the top, right, during an audit, if you're not seeing that food safety culture and that management support. So, maybe the auditors should be writing more nonconformances for that senior site leadership, not supportive. So
that's a good point. Yeah. And, it is easy as an auditor to tell if you have that management commitment at the top, that senior manager believes in those practices they're preaching, just through interview, just through watching them, through if during our internal audit we saw these things, are they putting resources forward to correct them? So yeah, I know nobody wants to get a non-conformance and management commitment, and even auditors don't like giving non-conformance and management commitment. Sometimes, like you said, it needs to happen.
Yeah, no, agreed. Sometimes it does. Sometimes that's the only way to get the response, the desired result.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So we've had lots of questions come in just in the last few minutes. So let me just quickly scan to see what else I've got. We've got another couple of minutes here. What kind of postings would you recommend putting up, Ryan? You mentioned that a couple of times. So what kind of postings would you put up for food safety culture?
I would put, I mean, something as simple as, hand washing postings, maybe step 1 through 5 or however many, wash your hands, putting out there, keep that on people's minds. Specific to your HACCP program, if you have CCP step, temperature, even if you're a warehouse, what are good temps? What are bad temps? What are good practice? What do you look out for? Things like that, just whatever topics are that concerns your facility, your food safety plan, put things, change that topic up just randomly. So people, of course, they've had the training, but it helps refresh their mind. It keeps that on the front of their mind. Oh, yes, this is how I'm supposed to wash my hands. This is how I'm supposed to do a CCP. Here's what the important temperature is for, the steak coming out of the oven, whatever it may be. But just switch that around to the topics that are important to you in your programs.
Yeah, something as simple as we put up a posting on how to wear a hairnet properly.
Yeah.
And it was so simple. I took our safety manager, who had great hair, by the way, and got him to take a picture of him properly wearing his hairnet. And then I put pictures of, his hairnet with his hair sticking out at the top or the bottom or not covering his ears. Something as simple as that encourages people. And if you make it personal, it was somebody they knew.
Yeah.
If you make it personal, they pay attention to those things. So
yeah, I've seen that as well. That's a good one.
Yeah. So what to do if production people do not take responsibility for food safety? We talked about discipline process. What are some suggestions or thoughts on that?
Yeah, hopefully it's not the entire, I know you could have one employee on the floor, you could have thousands of employees on the floor. So hopefully if you're in that middle range and you have more than one, hopefully it's not everybody on the floor that's doing these bad or these following, bad practices. So it's about retraining, of course. I think the first time you catch them doing something poor, it's about reminding them of the practice. So you want to make sure they understand the expectations. It was clearly communicated to them. So I would say clearly communicated the expectations to them. And if at that point it was, then follow disciplinary action. So if that's write up with additional training, whatever that may be. But you want to give them, of course, the benefit of the doubt because maybe, for whatever reason, they weren't paying attention. They didn't feel very good during the training exercise for whatever topic it was. So make sure they understand what's required of them before you just go out there and, hand them their pink slip, for example. But yeah, make sure they understand expectations and go down from there.
Yeah, no, great point. Okay, Brian, you want to advance to the last slide?
Yeah, of course.
We tried to answer as many questions as we could. But just as a reminder, this is just one digital seminar in our SQF 365 program that we have going on in 2023. We have a few more events coming up, some of those in person. So we have an event coming up in May that will be in Canada. More information to come on that exact location. And then also one in Chicago in September. So if we enjoy having everybody here for our digital seminars, but we also look forward to those in person. At times where we can, talk to you face to face. So please consider, attending one of those. But thank you all so much for being here today. And with that, I will let you all get back to the rest of your day. Thank you, Brian, again.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.